Hi and welcome, Espresso Sesh episode 112. My name is Nino Musco. You're listening to Best Frequencies Forever, BFF.fm. I have the honor and the pleasure to have next to me, guest in the studio, Beau Sorensen, Beaunoise. Welcome, Beau.
Thank you so much for having me.
A pleasure, a pleasure. A producer, Beau, a producer, music producer, composer, performer as well, but also studio engineer.
Yep.
You've been working for like a lot of records, like big names too.
All over the map. Yeah.
All over the map.
Yeah.
Let's stay a little closer to the mic. Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not usually on this side of the mic, so.
Yeah, you're on the other side.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, we started the show with one of your original production. Huh?
Yeah.
So you also make music, and we're gonna focus mostly. I mean, not only, but a lot of the time of the show tonight is gonna be about your own original production, no?
That's great.
But at the same time, you work as a studio engineer for Tiny Telephone and also a freelance. But mostly you are based at Tiny Telephone in San Francisco and Oakland.
Yes, at this point, mostly at Tiny Telephone.
Mostly at Tiny Telephone, where I think you find your kind of natural habitat, no? Because you are like a synthesizer, like gear, like. We're gonna go through like this in your music production.
Oh yeah.
But you love the gear, like the synthesizer,
I do,
the analog processor.
Yes. Yes.
And you make also so as I was saying, like natural habitat, because it feels good to be like in a place like Tiny Telephone where like they are. Encourage like the use of old synthesizer and vintage
analog recording gear.
Analog recording gear. So you find your habitat there, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think from the very first second I walked into a recording studio, I immediately just felt like at home, and I immediately thought I could spend the rest of my life in this room, and have always felt that way. Yeah. I just feel very comfortable about it, and I think the blend of creativity of music and technology and how creativity intersects with that has always been really appealing and fascinating to me.
Yeah, and also, you put in your own music, you mix together creativity and technology with homage to the past, like composer and reference, like cultural reference.
Oh yeah.
And also pop culture. There is this album that is called, let me see, you have many releases in your Bandcamp. You'll never close your lips when I kiss your eyes.
Yeah.
Like this release from 2011.
Yep.
Where you actually play with synthesizer, like samplers.
A lot of sampling.
Sampling.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like kind of pop culture.
A little bit, yeah.
Like, but there's like so many things in the
I think like a lot of people, I have a lot of interests, maybe to a fault, and so I try to focus those interests for like a specific album or a specific release. And that one in particular, there's an artist that I grew up listening to that puts out records under the name Stunt Rock. There was a lot of sample-based music, a lot of it's very aggressive, a lot of it's very loud, and I've just been obsessed with it for my whole life. And that album is, to be completely honest, it's me just trying to make my own version of a Stunt Rock album, like manipulating samples, juxtaposing like pop culture with like the absurd, sometimes the very profane. Yeah, and so that's sort of like, even like the title is kind of like a play on a very famous line from a very famous song, kind of twisting it up.
Okay.
So yeah.
So let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like you are from Wisconsin originally.
Yes.
Originally, and how you started your passion? How your passion for recording started?
It's kind of funny. I think like the thing that still amazes me to this day is like I don't know if there was ever a point at which I said I wanted to be a recording engineer or I wanted to spend my time in recording studios. And actually, one of the first people I worked with always said, it's sort of not a job that you choose, it kind of chooses you. And, you know, I mean, people say that about a lot of things, but I really think that's sort of true. I always grew up loving technology. I was always like taking apart the stereo, putting the stereo back together. I played with Legos a lot. When I was young, I like took apart electronics just to understand how they work. I didn't put many of them back together, but I was
but at least you put some of those together.
At some point, I did, yeah. And so at the same time, I grew up. You know, I played in jazz band, in marching band. I was in band in high school and doing that stuff. I also played like some guitar and some garage bands. You know, Nirvana was very popular at the time, so it was like a lot of sort of grunge music and that happening. And so like, but those two things kind of stayed separate, like the technological side and the musical side. And I never really knew that you could combine the two of them into some sort of like way to make a living and sort of a way to make a life, until I started studying recording. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, like this sort of blends these two interests that I had. And then the third part of it was being able to spend time with other people. And I think that was the part, because I love creative people. I love being around musicians, but I've never had a huge desire to perform or be a musician myself. But I love being in that environment. I also love facilitating. I love helping people be creative. And so I think from the first time I was in a studio, all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, like this kind of combines these different sort of spheres of influence in a way that like really feels natural to me. Yeah. I
mean, probably you don't like the spotlight, but you like to make music. I mean, like you are a musician, like to a certain degree.
I always like to say casual musician, and I like to say that making music is my hobby. Like engineering and producing records is my job, and then making my own music, I really truly make it primarily for myself. And the fact that anyone else has any interest in it is still amazing to me. I really make it for my own enjoyment, to stay connected to why I got into this in the first place. Also, part of it, I think of it as like a sandbox where I can kind of play and explore outside of sessions, and then some of the techniques and ideas I find there I can use on other people's projects. And so it's kind of like a way to kind of always keep discovering, I guess, too. But you're right that I've never really wanted to be in the spotlight. I've never really felt like I needed to perform. It's kind of more for my own sort of enjoyment, I guess.
Yeah, I see that. And so you started your project, your Beaunoise.
Yeah.
Around 2010, 11.
I think it's 2010, 2011. I'd been making music before then. I mean, I've been making music, since I had a four track in my parents', in my bedroom in my parents' house, and continued making that. But as I started working in studios, that kind of fell by the wayside a bit, or I'd sort of do it in my spare time. And it wasn't until someone I was working with heard some of the music I was working on in my spare time and really encouraged me to put out a cassette, which is kind of funny because I put that first cassette out sort of way before this recent cassette resurgence had happened. And I didn't really know what to call it, and so I just called it Beaunoise because I thought it's sort of funny because it's sort of this pejorative way of talking about my own music as just noise, and it's kind of making it sort of less serious in a way. And I think that was that first release, I was really just astounded by the response that different people got, that it sort of created in different people, because they were like, I didn't know you made music, I didn't know you had these ideas, and it kind of reminded me that I needed to keep doing that just to keep my own interest in music, and also it helps me build a little bit of empathy for what it's like to be an artist, because I think if you spend too much time just as an engineer or producer, you forget what it's like to be dedicated to your own creations, and you forget what it's like to be on that side of the glass where you're trying to make your own art perfect. So, I think it teaches me a lot of different things.
But also, writing music is something that comes like from the inside. Like,
yes.
It's kind of like a necessity, like a need at some point to, it's like an expressive need. No?
Yes, yeah. It sort of just happens. It's like it's a reaction to the world. It's a reaction to what's happening in your life, and it's just like, yeah. It sort of. Sometimes it's very deliberative, like I want to write this song or I want to write something. Sometimes it's like it happens where I'm just trying to figure out if something's working, and all of a sudden it does something really cool. I'm like, oh wow, I love that sound. And then and that started like many of the songs just started off as accidents of like I was trying to figure out, is this thing working or is this sounding okay? And then all of a sudden it starts to become really interesting. So let's
talk about actually the song, the first song of the show, no? Erika Tetralix from your album. Equipment and personnel. That is actually mostly, it's like a list of equipment, but the personnel is you, the only one.
It is really
playing
just
everything.
Yes, yep.
So let's talk about this music. Now, where you also record the drums, and so I went through your discography and I made a selection of like one track of. We go through that later.
Great,
no?
yeah.
But let's talk about the one we just heard.
Yeah, so that album, I think that album is the one that I consider like the truest version of what the music I want to make is. I think that's like a true Beaunoise record. And the others are sort of like different versions or different ideas. But that type of music, it's sort of mostly electronic, but blending some acoustic instruments, mostly instrumental, that sort of feel. I grew up listening to, like, there's a period where I really loved like a lot of electronic music in like the late 90s, early 2000s. A lot of sort of like experimental stuff, like labels like Warp and Reflex and Scam and all that stuff. Sort of beat driven. A lot of times people refer to it as intelligent dance music. So like a lot of those artists, I've always been really influenced and love how that they sort of mix kind of both the experimental and the contemporary. And so that album is sort of me reaching towards that as much as possible. And on that song in particular, I don't know how I got there. Like, I'm not a drummer. Like, I do not know how to play the drums. The one beat I know how to play is the beat that's in that song. And so, but it happened as like I had been working on that song, and I was in a studio. It was the studio I worked at before, the first studio that I worked at in Madison before I moved to Portland. And I had that song, and I'd been working on a session all day, and I was like, I wonder what it would be like if I tried to play drums to this song. And I that everyone had gone home for the day, and so I just had the drums still mic'd up from that day, and I just put the song on in Pro Tools, and I started trying to play to it, and all of a sudden it kind of changed the feel, like you said, sort of like almost like a more of a post-rock kind of feel, and it was something different in my music I hadn't heard before. And after many takes later, I eventually got a drum take I was happy with, and yeah, that's sort of this kind of how that one ended up having acoustic drums on it, I guess.
Yeah, because also like working as an engineer, no? So you track other bands and
primarily most of the time,
like, all the time, no?
Yep.
And it's your full-time job.
Yes. Yep.
But also you have probably you have some spare time at the studio at some point. Like there is like a lunch break, or like end of the day stuff.
Less and less all the time, but like a lot of times I'm coming in early in the morning to get set up, or like I'm the last person there, so I'm tearing down. Yeah. So like I do have these little windows of time, and for like a lot of the music that I've made, it's like I've been either at a studio that I really love, or like a place where they have some piece of equipment that I haven't used before, and so I'll say like, wow, I have access to this just for like a couple hours, and I'll take that time to like start a piece of music or finish a piece of music, and so a lot of it sort of is getting kind of snuck in at the beginning or end of days.
Let's listen another song out of another album.
Yeah.
That is less probably let's say eclectic or like a song.
Yeah.
Like shaped, but it's like actually like a piano work.
Yes.
Piano works. No?
Yep. Which is actually a great example of what I was just talking about. Like
exactly.
Almost all of those pieces that if you notice in the credits, like almost all of them are recorded at different studios. and almost all of them were recorded on different pianos in studios I was working at on days where I'd been recording a piano, and I was like, I really like the characters of that piano, and I would either make samples of it or I would treat it or process it. So this album is all kind of made. I think the tracks span almost like 10 years from when they recorded, and it's all made just sort of at the end of sessions, probably. Yeah, that's a great example of that.
And also, it's a great example where you can combine like the acoustic instrument with processing, sound processing.
Yep.
So actually, I selected the piano 4 song to be precise. Let's listen to Beaunoise, BFF.FM, best frequencies forever. Piano 4. And this was piano 4. Example of, like we say before, like having some free time at the end of sessions and working on your stuff and combining elements like processing sounds, like natural sound, acoustic sounds, and
that piece started off as I had some spare time at a studio, and I think it started off with just the piano part that you hear. And then I was kind of curious about how I could integrate like a synthesizer with the piano. And the synthesizer in that is this, it's like a smaller portable synthesizer called the Buchla Music Easel. And I kind of wanted it to sort of just be very percussive, very insistent, almost like, I mean, I really wanted it to sound like an alarm clock at the beginning of this sort of very kind of intense sort of driving thing. And so the piano part happened first. And my was originally, the theory when I did the piano part was that I was going to, all the other parts you hear that the synthesizer played, those are going to be piano parts too. I was like, maybe it'll be different pianos, or maybe it'll be something else. So I had those notes already written on separate tracks. And then I eventually was like, it was just too much of the same tonality. And I mean, that's maybe an example of the influence of being an engineer. Is I'm always trying to sort out people's recordings so that, you know, if they're playing guitar and there's another instrument in that same range, I might say, like, can we try it in a different octave, or can we try a different instrument? And so I think that sort of led me to think, like, what if I tried a completely different tonality? So, like, the piano is kind of pretty warm. It's pretty round comparatively. And then the synthesizer is very buzzy and very bright and percussive. And I think I really liked that juxtaposition. So, and also, I'm fairly certain, like, the piano probably happened at one point, and then the synthesizer probably happened a year, 2 years later. You know, it was like a piece that was probably kicking around for a while. And then I was like, maybe I should try to finish this. And yeah.
Yeah, but because, you know, like, I mean, music has no expiration date, and also, you know, when you like draft something,
Yeah.
you can let it sit for like years, and then maybe like you find, you know,
it's amazing. Yeah, things I come back to that are. I think that's one of the things I learned through like reading or learning about some of my heroes. One of them, which many people's heroes, like Brian Eno, is just like you start to listen to his music, you realize how many things he recycles from other recordings, or, you know, you can hear in some of his earlier or sort of early middle period ambient records, you can definitely tell there's parts of tapes from his solo records, or things being, you know, I think some of like more music for films. There's a couple tracks where you're like, that's definitely something off of another record being played at half speed, and so that kind of taught me to like recycle my own work and also just keep everything. And, you know, you come back to it and you're like, I still think that's terrible. Come back to it, I still think that's terrible. And then all of a sudden something changes. Or your context will change, and you'll be like, that's actually really useful. So that's how a lot of my music happens, is kind of like over like long stretches of time like that.
Yeah, but also, you know, like probably you along the way you learn different techniques. No? Like for example, this album, you were like listing that you did lots of like tape modification, you know, like splicing, like tape, like, you know, I don't even remember like all the terms, but you know. So probably you get more into that, like with your experience as an engineer.
Definitely, no? It's like I maybe was working on a project where someone's like, I want to make some tape loops, or I want to try to like treat or process this, and it's a little bit chicken egg, where like either the project will influence what I do with my own music, or I'll develop or sort of explore those techniques in my own music, and then that'll end up on someone's record because they'll say like, I want to do this thing. I was like, oh, I did this great version of that the other day, like let's try this. So they are sort of like referential in a way. Yeah. Let's play another song actually from another album, Beep Tunes actually. Oh yeah.
This is from 2011.
Yeah.
So this is more like with analog synthesizer and like blip tunes, like the name says itself.
Yeah.
Like chip tunes.
Yeah, it was definitely sort of playing on like chip tunes, or just like, I think this was sort of like kind of the beginning when I started to have access to more analog synthesizers and a couple modular synthesizers. I was really blessed that a friend of mine, a guy named Tim Curtis, who was a tech at a studio I worked at, had a Surge modular system, which is like a sort of a very classic West Coast style modular synthesizer. And it's the sort of thing I dreamed my whole life of being able to use, and I never even encountered one. And so he had it at the studio, and he let me borrow it, and he let me use it a bit. And some of these recordings are the first things that I did with that. And because they're like generally like a little bit on the cheerful side, and they're kind of up tempo and a little bit sort of chirpy, I think I just decided to call it Beep Tunes, because I had a little collection of songs that all kind of felt like these little like sort of like pulsy synthesizer and sequencer based pieces.
Let's listen to, how you pronounce it, bonk?
Yeah, actually it's I mean, the way I title my songs is completely absurd. It's like almost all of them, the titles happen afterwards, and I usually just make it up. Like this one, I don't think I've ever even said the name of the song out loud, so it's however people want to say it. And I think it's mostly just sort of a reference to how it kind of sounds. Like a lot of sounds.
Onomatopoeia.
Onomatopoeia, yeah, exactly, yeah.
All right, let's listen to bonk.
Perfect.
Beaunoise, BFF.FM, Espresso Sesh. Beaunoise from Beep Tunes. So, like the device, the instrument, the gear, it's a part of your creativity, you know? To the point that you like created albums on a specific device, like on the gear. Like
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Buchla work.
Yes.
It's made out with like a synthesizer. Just all the music in that album is made like with that
specific synthesizer. Yes. Yep.
Or like this one with the Surge modular, no?
This one, it's actually a couple different synthesizers. Like it's like I think most of the pieces I think were Surge modular, and I think that last one is more based. It's actually it is like actually a chip that makes the chip is like the SID. I think is the SID 6581, which was used in the Commodore 64 computer, which is a computer I had when I was growing up. So that one actually is very more chiptune than modular, but the
concept,
and that one, and I can think like a lot of times, like I don't set out trying to make an album of just this type of music. It's just more like I make a bunch of different music, and then I eventually find that I have all these songs that were done at the piano, and I was like, wow, well, maybe I'll just collect that together to make it thematic. And the same thing with like the Buchla works that I've done. Like I'm a big fan of that synthesizer, and so I end up making a lot of music with it. But I want to eventually find like pieces that feel like they sit together. I was like, maybe that'll be a digestible way to kind of understand some of the music I make.
Yeah, Buchla, it's a very local company, no? Dan Buchla actually he died in Berkeley, so it was Berkeley. It's Berkeley, you know. It's
the most ironic thing in the world. I mean, I never planned to live in Berkeley, California, and here I am. You know, I live just like a half a mile from where Don's shop was, and have several friends who used to work for him. It's like I never imagined it would happen, but it's this weird thing. I think it's a good example of the energy you put out in the world in some way comes back to you, and yeah, it's strange.
Actually, let's talk a little bit of your traveling for work. No, I mean, from Madison you moved. To Portland, no?
Yes.
To work Sound City, the studio.
Well, I did some work. I was during the years I was in Portland. I was all working freelance. So the first studio I worked at was in Madison, Wisconsin. It was a studio called Smart Studios, and I started off as an intern, and then as an assistant, and then a staff engineer up until they closed. And then when they closed, I was a little bit lost because I had been technically an employee of the studio, and that was how I knew how to make records as a person that was attached to the studio. But there aren't a lot of jobs, as everyone knows, as a person employed by a recording studio, and so I decided to start working freelance. I had enough work at the time where it's like, I feel like I could probably string this together. And so I moved to Portland because I had spent some time working there and had some friends there. And during that time, I actually spent more time working outside of Portland than I worked at studios in Portland. And Sound City was one of the studios I worked at. It was mostly studios up and down the West Coast, like Vancouver, Seattle, San Francisco. Tiny Telephone was one of them, Los Angeles, but also Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis. Not as much work on the East Coast. So during that time I was traveling for work a lot.
And you got to work with even like big names, no? In the industry.
Yep, yeah, and that was sort of what brought me. So that was part of what brought me to some of those studios. Was like when I was at Sound City, it was I was working with a band called Death Cab for Cutie there. It's like helping record one of their records, and that's kind of what brought me into that studio for the first time.
I would like to let you choose some recording that you are very proud of, like you did, but we do this probably like on the second part of the interview.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, so I give you sometimes offline, off air, no?
Of course,
to do the research, no?
Yeah.
And but you know, in the meanwhile, let's play another of the original tunes.
Of course, yeah.
We're talking about Buchla.
Yeah.
The Buchla Works Module 1.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually your last release.
Yep.
Chronologically.
Yeah, that's the most recent thing, which is a couple years. I mean, it's a couple years out at this point, mostly because I've been busier with recording and engineering than my own music lately. But there's another one on the way before too long.
Yeah, that is the question. What was it? So you're working on some other? materials.
There's always
something
things.
in the
There's
world.
always things being worked on. Like the last few years has seen just like a lot more production and engineering work for me, which is good, and I'm thankful to be doing it. But it means there's less time for my own music, which is fine. Like I'm starting to. There's starting to be songs piling up, and I think before too long there'll be some more. Yeah.
All right, let's listen to this song, 340 Hours.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole album is made with this synthesizer, the Buchla 300 S?
200.
200
Yep.
S.
It's mostly 200, and then there's also some of the music easel, which is a smaller portable version.
Portable.
It was kind of designed to be a portable version of, but mostly it's like the 200, some 200 and 200E modules. Yeah.
All right, 340 Hours, Beaunoise, BFF.fm. So that was from Buchla Works, actually Module 1.
Yes.
So from the title itself, there is going to be a sequel, no?
There was, yeah. There's another one on the way.
On
yeah,
the way,
definitely.
yeah.
Yep. And that piece actually, that's all the music easel, the more portable one, and the reverb you hear it on it is the built-in spring reverb, which has a very characteristic sort of sound to it as well. So, yeah, that one's all music easel. Yeah.
So, do you also compose at home? You have,
Yes.
So you have like gear at home, you make your own stuff, no?
Yes. One of the very first things, one of the first engineers I assisted on when I was working at the first studio I worked at, one of the things he told me was, no matter where you're working, if you're working at the nicest studio in the world, if you get hired by Abbey Road to work there, always have a place at home to record and work on your own music. Like, always have a way to do it, like, sort of outside of work, outside of a studio. And I kind of always have kept that advice to have my own space just to work on my own music, so I don't have to depend on a studio. So, like, and that affords me a lot more time. That affords me all the time that I'm not at work to be able to work on my own music. So,
But do you have time besides the studio hours, like, you know, like besides engineering? No?
yeah, well,
Do you still have free time to do that?
not as much. And I have to be honest, like, when I was younger, it was a lot easier for me to stay up for 4 or 5 extra hours at the end of the day and do a little bit of work. And as I'm getting older, it's like at the end of the day, I start to be, you know, my projects are a little more demanding than they used to be, which is good, and I like that. It's exciting, but it means that there's just less and less time, which is why the releases are taking longer and longer. But
Yeah, but there is no like a deadline, or there is no like any pressure for release. Like, so
as I've said before, it's like I make this music primarily for myself, and so like I try not to put pressure on myself. I try to let it happen naturally. So yeah.
But I've seen that there are like a lot of people that are enjoying your music. I mean, on Bandcamp, I also like I see the feedback. So
I am as surprised by it as anyone, and I'm honored and flattered. And when people send me messages how much they've enjoyed it, I've had, I mean, and I don't mean this to brag, but I've had people who said I was ill for a long time and I was not feeling well, and listening to some of the ambient music you made, really, I found it very soothing while I was like trying to recover from this illness. It's like, which I think that was the first point in which I really realized like the music that I put out there can affect people's lives. And it's like, it sort of is, it's one of the things when I'm working with other people, I always tell them like, the music you put out in the world, it will change people's lives. It will change your life. Maybe not in ways you'll predict. But it's like a very real example of that. So yeah.
Yeah, music is effective. So
it is.
It touches. Like,
definitely. And we all have the music that's affected us. It's like if I could meet some of my heroes, I would say like this record. How many records have changed my life or the trajectory of my life? So it is very real. And I think when I started putting out music, I could sort of like kind of started just putting out there. It's like, oh, a couple people will hear it, and then when people start to respond to it, it's astonishing. Yeah, I still can't believe it.
But because also, I mean, like working in the music industry, you also, you can give like, I mean, I was reading the interview on the Tape Op magazine, talking about the making of the Dead Cab for Cutie album.
Yep.
Which one it was?
I think that was probably Codes and Keys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were talking like aesthetically, you there were less guitar in the, so like as an engineer, like long story short, as an engineer you can give your own perspective to the musician, to the band, and also you learn from it and they learn from you, and also they always remember you being an engineer. So once you release some of your own music, these people, they're gonna listen to it because they gonna remember. They definitely remember you for the work you did for them. No?
Yes, it definitely people, and it surprises people at times too, because it's like, I mean, some of the records I've made, it's like I've worked on like a number of records that are like loud rock records, you know what I mean, that I'm very proud of, but they sound so different than this music, and I love those records. I love a lot of that music as well. And so sometimes when I put that music out, like people hear the music I work on, they're like, wow, it's so different than what you work on. It's like, well, I guess like all of us have a lot of different musical interests, and so yeah.
Actually, talking about different the different music that you made, there is this album actually, H3000.
Yes.
That is interesting because you got this device. It's an harmonizer, but wasn't working properly when you got it.
Yep.
And you noticed that it was doing like weird noises.
Yeah.
And you were fascinated of these noises.
Yeah.
So you started recording it.
So the Eventide H3000. I mean, Eventide it's a company that since the early 70s has been making very inventive effects processors, and they sort of were the first people to invent the harmonizer. The 910 and the 949 were used to great degree on like David Bowie's Low. The snare drum sound on David Bowie's Low is a very famous example of this sort of pitch shifted sound, and it shows up again on Scary Monsters. And then so like they've been making these devices that are very sort of revolutionary in music. I think I love the Eventide stuff because, especially the early stuff, it feels like a bunch of guys like from MIT decided to build this thing and release it to engineers and producers, but they didn't really know what it was supposed to do. Whereas most like equipment in the studio, like we built this really nice equalizer, we built this nice microphone. It kind of feels like, I mean, not that they didn't know what they're doing, but it kind of felt like they were just like, we built this thing, it does weird stuff, what do you think? And everybody that
very avant-garde.
Yes, exactly. And everybody that used it did something different with it. And it influenced recording in a pretty huge way. And anyway, so the H3000 was a few models later. It was like it had a little bit more expanded capability. You could save some presets and do some stuff. And there was one at the first studio I worked at Smart Studios, and it was a favorite there as well. And when that studio closed, they offered to sell it to me because they knew that I really liked it. And so I was like, I would love that device. I've used it for years to do weird and kind of inventive stuff. And they shipped it to me, and I plugged it in. I was like, oh, I'm so excited to get it. And it was fine at first, and then as it started to warm up, it started to develop these weird kind of like sort of glitchy digital sounds, because it's like an early digital device, and like I think there's 3 CPUs that are clocked together in it, and as they start to come unclocked, like different algorithms create sort of like these different kind of artifacts, and some algorithms worked fine, and then some of them were just like straight feedback, and some of them were noisy. Some of them would work fine at first and slowly start building up stuff. And there's a guy in Los Angeles that specializes in fixing them. I was like, well, I guess I'll have to get it fixed. But before I did, I was like, I should record some of this, because when it comes back, it'll never make this sound again. And I after like, and I made just like a lot of recordings of it and just kind of sat on them for a while. And then as I started to listen to them, I was like, I came back to them again, like we said, like a couple of years later, and I was like, wow, like some of these are actually really beautiful and just really interesting, and sounds I hadn't heard before. And so I started to like layer them and composite them and do a little bit of manipulation to kind of build them into kind of more like experimental sound pieces. So it's maybe the closest thing I've made to like a pure like noise record. And it's also sort of just based in my love and fondness for this weird piece of equipment that I still use to this day.
Cool. Let's listen now like a short track for it. It's the second track, Quivering Echo.
Yeah, and they're all named after the exact algorithm I believe that I was using. So like all the track titles are just like that was the algorithm that created that sound.
So there was the like 579.
Number 579.
Yeah,
yep.
Canyon, yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is the 870 Quivering Echo. Yeah, definitely this is more experimental and like in brackets odd comparing to but you know that's why I say like in brackets, because there is a beauty in the noise itself, and there is also an aesthetic of it.
Definitely. And I've always, I'm not sure why, but I've always had an appreciation for a pretty wide variety of sounds, and in some ways it sometimes makes my job as an engineer or producer a little bit difficult, because I maybe have a higher tolerance for very weird or very noisy or very unpleasant things, because I've sort of never discriminated them as being more or less musical. Like I enjoy them equally in a different way. So yeah, I sort of have always been a fan of that stuff too.
Yeah, because it's you know, music as like music serves to our feeling, no? Like, you know, that's the soundtrack of our emotional, like, you know, moment, mood. So, you know, the noise sometimes is also important.
We exactly. We have those. We all have moments and periods and feelings of that too. So yeah. But
you know, like let's jump from this moment that is more like experimental to something that is more classic and linear.
Yeah.
Like you had this actually this Satie works.
Yes.
So you took like a classic composer.
Yep.
And you, I mean, a la Wendy Carlos
exactly
switched on back,
back
in the 1968,
Yep.
So you had this kind of approach to take some classic Satie work.
Yep.
And performed on synthesizer.
Yeah. So I grew up loving switched on Bach. There's another artist, a Japanese artist named Tomita, who's done a lot of, I think that was all Moog modular as well, doing like classic Stravinsky and Debussy and pieces like that on the synthesizer. And I sort of looked through, and I didn't really see that anybody had done the similar thing for CT, like one of those sort of like 70s synth records that were so popular at the time. And I was like, maybe I could try to, and Satie is like a much, many people love his music. It's been used in so many films. It's instantly recognizable, just like such moving melodies.
Was it the acetone scales?
Yeah. And so I was like, I wonder if I could do that, and then I could dedicate each piece. I would just pick a few pieces, and I wonder if I could dedicate each piece to a different synthesizer. So I would make it all on a certain synthesizer. And I just thought it would be an interesting exercise for me to learn that synthesizer and to become more familiar with those pieces. And I was also like, after something like H3000, I was like, well, people like Eric Satie, so maybe it's a little more palatable than just straight noise. So
let's listen to Gymnopédie number 1, the classic Eric Satie composition in the Satie Works Beaunoise. From classic Satie to some ambient sounds. You released 3 ambient album.
Yes.
So
there is a 4th one that hasn't been released yet. It's out there. Yeah.
There is a 4th one in the coming up.
It's there. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's play this actually from Ambient 2, number 58. And also, I mean, like we talked about this before the show, no? Like you randomly give like number to these songs, the composition, like.
When I started doing the ambient pieces, I very quickly started to have them, and they're not written. I mean, some of them are written about certain times or places or feelings, but some of them are just sort of written. And I think I didn't want to try to like instruct anybody how to feel in listening to them. I think I kind of wanted to leave that open. So I was like, whereas if I gave it a title that had something very descriptive, someone might like think like, oh, this song is about this, or this song is about that. And so I started to just catalog them by number. And then when I decided to start releasing them, I was like, well, maybe I'll just keep the number of what piece that was. And so I kind of like the ambiguity of just numbering them.
And also because if you just keep the catalog number, like you don't kind of like direct people into some mood, like they can be free, and
I wanted to leave it open, and also that's why they're out of order, so it's like there's no specific sequence. I just kind of wanted to put it out there. It's really just a way to tell which one is which, but I kind of wanted them to be anonymous and sort of only identified by how they sound, I guess.
Okay, let's play just number 58 from Ambient to Beaunoise, BFF.fm. So while the number 58 is going probably like a little in the background,
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, Beau, so this is very cinematic.
Yes.
So I've read that you compose music for soundtrack, no? You compose soundtrack. So this is make me think that while you were sitting there, like playing this music, you had like a vision of it, like how
Yeah.
how it works.
I can remember this piece. Like I don't think I had a specific vision or image for it. I think if I remember correctly, I was listening to something else. I don't actually even remember what it was I was listening to, but I was just really fascinated with a recording that had something that felt very sinister. And whenever I listened to it, this recording just made me feel like really bad. I was like, this feels really dark. And I was so impressed. I was like, at how this recording, which I knew was just a recording, it was just some recorded music, would elicit this feeling, and it would just like really put me in this place. And I wanted to try to do that myself. I was like, I want to really set out to make something that just feels really dark, really sinister, and just kind of like really sort of channels that mood. And it's not a mood I particularly like to spend time in or feel, but I was like, I wonder if I could create that. And I wonder if I could do it in a way, though, that was still musically interesting, still maybe like, not just like unpleasant noise or something really harsh, but something that just kind of carries that sort of sinister feeling.
And also see if you can actually deliver that feeling to the listener. No?
Yes, and like most of my none of my music has any words, and doing that without language, to do that all just with sound.
That's another one. I'll keep playing this while we're talking because they are like good. Also.
Yeah.
It's 3:02 now. Uh-huh. It's like it's been 1 hour already, and I would like to spend some time now about your work as an engineer. No.
Yep.
So you are full. You are engineer at Tiny Telephone. So you work there all the time. So let's start from the San Francisco music scene. No.
Yeah.
So what's your 2 cents about the scene? Are you working with a lot of music? So are a lot of musicians from the Bay Area going to record at Tiny Telephone, or are people, or are bands, artists from somewhere else? So how is the Bay Area music scene for you?
It's interesting. Coming here from Portland, Portland's known as a great music city, and it is a great music city. Like, the music scene in Portland is incredible, and it's probably more a reflection on me, but I have been able to connect to and work with more music that I've been interested in and excited about and been challenged by since moving to the Bay Area than during my time in Portland. And that's definitely not a diss on music in Portland. I think it was probably because I was traveling and I was out of town a lot more, and I never really found my way to connect to that. But I've worked with a lot of really amazing, innovative artists in the Bay Area, and it's like people talk a lot about how hard it is to exist in the Bay Area, how arts are being chased out of the Bay Area, which is completely true, and I definitely don't discount any of those things. But there is a level of the people that are still here, that are doing it, are incredibly committed to it and working incredibly hard to do it and doing it at a very high level. So I think, like, for me, it's hard because it's like I'm surrounded by people that are working very hard to make very good music and to like create their art every single day. So my bubble is like completely full of that. Whereas, if I wasn't in a studio, I would maybe have a different feeling about that. But there are so many artists here that are making music that I'm excited about, and I feel lucky to be able to spend time with.
Yeah, this is also my point of view also, because like hosting a radio show with and guesting like mostly local artists each week. So there is,
and you're probably amazed by the people that come through here, and it's like a steady stream of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but for example, when John was here, John van der Slijs, he wasn't that optimistic about. I mean, he had other reason to talk to. No, he had like. I mean, he was talking about like the fragility of San Francisco, especially like if you are renting a place and the landlord sell the building. You know, this is like,
completely. And I definitely like that is all completely true, and like it is incredibly difficult. You know, it's very expensive. I mean, just like the real estate and housing situation is completely insane, and so it is very difficult. And everyone I know feels that stress all the time, and it's like on everyone's mind always. So I definitely don't want to discount any of that difficulty at all, but I think it's important just to remember that there still are people making and trying to pursue art at a high level,
and there is a quality
Yes.
music out of San Francisco.
Definitely. Oh,
Okay.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Okay. No, this is good to know. I mean, it's like
It's, I mean, it's the story of like any place where it's like, it's like people take an aspect of an area and they encapsulate it down to one story. It's like people think all of Detroit is broken and people think that all of Chicago is violent, and it's like there's like a lot more happening there than you realize. And I mean, I had that feeling before I came here. I was like, it's part of why it took me so long to end up here. I was like, I work in music for a living. There's no way I could exist in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And then once I was here, I actually found more work and better, and people that I really love and have connected to. So I think there's always like another story there that's like maybe more subtle than just like the big takeaway, which is still, a very valid thing to consider.
What are you working these days? Project? You can say something, or
Yeah, I don't
some
think
exciting things you are doing on your engineer.
Yeah, some things that I'm working on right now. There's some things I probably can't talk about just because like it's still coming up, and I also have this superstition about not talking about a project before it happens.
Yeah.
But right now I'm finishing up a bunch of songs that I've been helping engineer and produce with my friend Andrew, who puts out music under the name Veros, which I'm very excited about a lot of that. I just spent a couple days.
Shout out Varos.
Yeah. I just spent a couple days with my friend Kathleen, who I think I think maybe the name of her project has shifted a little bit, but it was under Lyra, and some of that music is turning out really, really great. I'm excited about that. I'm actually about to do some recording with my friend Rebecca Rigo. I mixed a record with her at Tiny Telephone about a year ago, and we're going to start recording some new songs soon. That was really good. I'm trying to think of what else was before that. It's hard. I can really only think about what I did in the immediate days before and what's coming up ahead. So those are some maybe some more immediate recent things. On a bigger scale, some of the stuff I've worked on recently, I'm incredibly proud of the last Tune Yards record, which was recorded almost all at Tiny Telephone Oakland. They did a lot of the recording on some of the recording on their own as well in their studio, but we did the bulk of it, I believe, in Oakland, and that's an incredible record. Like very sort of like a lot of growth both for them and just for music that I'm really excited about. I recorded it out east, but then I mixed this record at my house, the last Superchunk record, and I'm really, really proud of how that record sounds and how it feels. It's also as there's sort of after the election, there's a lot of talk about, and sort of in the runoff after that, people like making political music, and they're sort of like people are saying like, where's all the political music, where's the protest music? And I think both like the Tune Yards record and the Superchunk records are incredible statements on the world right now, and a great example of like modern protest music that I'm really just honored to be a part of. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else. I just wrapped up mixing a bunch of songs with my friend Kevin Dickerson, who we've put out a lot of music recently, and I'm really excited for those. Those feel like a big step forward for the work that he's doing, which I loved from the very beginning, but he's always maybe there's a parallel in the music of mine that we've listened to, is that he's always exploring new forms and trying on different instruments and different sounds. So that's a bunch of it. Sorry, I hope that wasn't like just too much rambling.
No. It's I mean, it's good because so besides your job, you are also excited doing it.
I would say that like I'm very fortunate in the fact that like there are very few projects I end up working on that I don't have some sort of connection or excitement to. You know, it's just like there's enough good work by good people that I just feel so blessed to be doing that. Yeah. There's Talk is another one. My friends There's Talk just put out this incredible EP that I'm honored to have mixed a bunch of. So yeah, another great Bay Area band.
Did you, when you do your engineering work, do you get to actually, suggest, put your own little, besides engineering,
Yeah,
you
sort of
do
my
you
own influence.
in it, like sound or like...
I guess like one is different in every project, and every project has a different need. Like some projects are very realized, and like they don't need, some projects have too many ideas, and they don't need more ideas or input from me. They just need someone to help present it as clearly and as close to what they want as possible. And I'm so thrilled to work on those projects where it's like I'm really sort of more of a technician and a facilitator. And then some projects, like, they're 80% realized, but there's a few things that maybe they're like we're not sure about this or that, and people will ask. Or a lot of it's about developing a working relationship where it's like I can understand. I'm like I think I've always said from the beginning that like I don't want the records I work on to sound like me. Like I want them to sound like the people I'm working on, because I have this music like which we've been listening to. That's for me, and I want their records to sound like them. And of course, like we have sensibilities, so it's like there are certain things in the records I make that if someone listened to them, you'd probably be like, oh yeah, that's definitely like the thing that I do. But I'm always trying to match what I bring to a project to match what they feel is needed. The last thing I'd want to do is like add a bunch of my influence if it's not useful or needed.
Well, so I have this idea about like the songwriter and the producer. So it's good there are two different person in two different roles, because the producer has less invested
yes.
on the music,
Yep.
and can do like a more like cold, productive.
Yes, and can be
work.
Maybe a little more decisive, a little bit harsh, and be like, this is not working, or this needs to be different. Yeah. Whereas when it's yours, you're a little married to it, and you can't like let go of the things you like, or you can't see your way out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because also you are into that too much, no?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that happens to me with my own music, and in fact, like that's like why my own music is. I was joking with my friend Andrew the other day because there are times when we're working on stuff where like he can get a little bit obsessive about how things working, and like a lot of artists, and I'm always trying to assure him like I think it's probably okay, like we don't need to obsess that much. And then I go home and I was working on some of my music, and I was doing the exact thing that I was telling him, like it's okay. Like I was like realizing how obsessive I was getting, and I came into work the next day and I was like, I'm such a hypocrite, because like the thing that I tell you to just relax about in your own music, and when I'm doing it myself, I am just as obsessive. And so again, it teaches me like empathy of what it's like to be an artist and try to like finish something or get it the way you want.
So for your own music, have you ever worked with a producer?
Actually, that's interesting. I actually haven't, and it's probably mostly because of time. There are a couple projects I've worked on collaboratively. Like there's some things I work on with other people, but in those projects, I think we're probably all split sort of equally. It would be interesting. That actually might be a good idea. Just like
because you're gonna be on the other side of the
and maybe just send some of it off to someone and be like, you like let them sort of sort through it, or have them kind of push me around a little bit.
Yeah, because you are a engineer, so you do mixing, you do so everything so you don't need somebody else doing
someone else's input.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
but also it can be interesting to see like somebody that is detached from
who isn't wrapped up in the making of it, or could see a different way through it. That's actually, it'd probably be pretty healthy for me to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's I should do the same.
Yeah.
To let somebody else like listen to it and like do their own, but it should be somebody that you trust. No?
Yeah. Well, we all need that. I mean, I've always said like authors have editors, and I've always compared that to what I do in the studio. Is like I think of myself as like an editor, like someone else is an author, and I can sometimes like look at it and say like, I think you're trying to say this, but like maybe we could move it like this to maybe make it clearer or maybe it closer to what you're saying. And ideally someone will say like, yes, that is what I'm thinking. And so yeah, I feel like every great author needs an editor as well.
Yeah, or like it's gonna be like harder. I mean, you can do it yourself, being author and editor, but it's a little harder.
Yeah,
takes more like commitment. And,
and you might miss. You know, we all have our blind spots. I definitely don't believe I make all of my own music myself, but I definitely don't believe that's because I'm the best person to make it. It's mostly out of necessity of just like I have an hour here, and I also don't want to bother someone else with it. But it would be good to get someone else on it, maybe.
You wanna play some music that you are proud that you recorded and it's already out there and you are proud of?
Yeah.
You wanna probably let's play something out of Beaunoise.
Okay. Yeah.
And you think about it.
And I'll get something pulled up. Yeah.
Yes. So let me play another one from Equipment and Personnel.
Oh great. Yeah.
So let's play Novem.
Mm-hmm.
This comes again. This title in I think it's the Book Awards.
Yeah,
there are two actually, minor and major.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you're one of the only people that noticed that, but it is true. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's out from November.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So let's play Novem out of Personal Equipment and Personnel, and then. You think about something that you are as an engineer, you are very proud of, and it's out there, and we can play.
We can listen to it. Yeah.
All right. You're listening to Espresso Sesh, best frequencies forever, BFF.fm, Beaunoise in the house. Let's listen to Novem out of Equipment and Personnel. All right. Yeah. Espresso Sesh, Beaunoise guest today. So I was asking you to pick up some songs, like you pick up one that you are proud of, that you engineered.
Yeah.
So you pick up something that is local and is also a cover from a band that you love.
Yep.
So which one is?
So this is a song we recorded and mixed at Tiny Telephone not too long ago. Actually, it's the band Rogue Wave, and they're doing a cover of Nada Surf's "Blonde on Blonde." Two bands that I've loved for a long time, and we recorded and mixed the whole thing, I think, in 2 days. And I was just really, cover versions are always very controversial, but I was really, just honored to be able to work with this band and like to cover this song that I've always loved, and to kind of sort of take it in a different direction. So
let's listen to it. Blonde on Blonde, Rogue Wave.
Cats and dogs are coming down 14th Street is gonna drown. Portable stereo, it's a lullaby from a giant golden radio. I've got blonde on blonde on my portable stereo. It's a lullaby from a giant golden radio. It's a lullaby.
So this was Rock Wave, Blonde on Blonde. Proud of work.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
And, as I said, like people that I really admired and loved working with. Also, I love that it came together so fast. I mean, We tracked it all in a day and maybe a couple overdubs the next day and mixed it in like a half a day. So it was like, it's just really, it feels really good. Like some projects I work take a long time. It's like many months. Some projects happen really quickly. And sometimes it's exciting to have something that feels really good that happens like really quickly. And you kind of just walk away from it and you're like, I think that was great. And everyone really likes it. So yeah.
Another pick, we have Q next. It's Bob Mould.
The Descent.
The Descent.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a local artist.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, this song was recorded. We tracked it at this song used 3 different recording studios in the Bay Area. We tracked it at Hyde Street, and we did all the guitar overdubs at Tiny Telephone in the B Room, and then we mixed it at Different Fur. This was actually, I believe, made while I was still living in Portland, and it's one of the sessions that brought me to the Bay Area before I lived here, actually.
So let's listen to it. And you are also featuring in the video.
So the video was shot in Portland by the amazing Alicia Rose, and when they were shooting the video, they asked if I could come by and hang out for a second, and I ended up there's like one quick shot of me in the video, I believe.
All right. The Descent, Bob Mould, BFF.fm.
I started out so starry-eyed, full of hope and wonder. And I wore flowers in my hair, not aware I'd been defiled. Every time I see you, I know it's going down. Karma comes around. I know this ride. You must be there by my side. You going down. I must be descending. I didn't want to play the song that gave people so much hope. I turned my back and turned away. Here's the rope that made me choke. Every time I see you, I know it's going down. How can I believe you? Karma comes around. You can see it in my eyes. You can read it on my face. You can hear it as I cry. God, I hope it's not too late. Can I try to make it up to you somehow? Can I try to make it up to you somehow? You can see it in my eyes. You can read it on my
And this is another example of the sonic range. This is like rock and roll music. So you've been working like
Yep.
with different genres, like
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously super proud to like have anything to do with anything that Bob Mould has done, but I also just think it illustrates really well the fact that like I make a lot of electronic music in my spare time, but the work that I do, in the studio ranges all over the place. It's not all electronic based in that way. So yeah.
So there is like variety of sounds.
Yep.
So we just played these two songs that you are proud of being like engineer of the
Incredibly,
of
yes,
Ingrid
yeah.
Brown. And now it's for the last like half an hour.
Yeah.
You brought some records here.
Yeah.
So you're gonna do like a selection. You wanna introduce it? Like this is some influential music for you.
Yeah. Yep. I thought I'd bring some records that maybe influenced me in certain ways, and also maybe just sort of have like kind of landed in the work that I do. And I think maybe like it'll sort of provide some context to some of the stuff we've listened to earlier. So
Okay, let's start. Let's just introduce it. What kind of like where you gonna take it, or just
I'm probably just I'm actually a terrible DJ, so I'm probably just gonna play stuff.
Yeah,
I'll just pick stuff randomly that
yeah.
seems exciting.
yeah, sounds great.
So the first one, if I hold it up, can people see it? Like, the first one is by one of my favorite artists from the '70s. It's these guys, Kevin Godley and Lal Cream, and Godley and Cream were part of this group called 10cc, which you may know.
Yeah.
They had a big hit, "I'm Not in Love." And the thing about Godley and Cream, after they left, 10cc's records are impeccably recorded, and they were kind of like studio obsessives. Like they, went to crazy lengths to record these really, really complex, beautiful records. And then when they broke off, they started to make their own music, which was also like very, very like technically accomplished, but also like kind of weird too. And the song I'm going to play is this song called "I Pity Inanimate Objects," which I've been obsessed with for years. And it's a great example because I'm pretty sure it uses one of the early Eventide harmonizers on the vocals. And it's just a very kind of strange, demented song that I've loved for many years. So this is "I Pity Inanimate Objects" by Godley and Cream from the album Freeze Frame.
I pity inanimate objects because they cannot move from specks of dust to paper plates or a pound of sealed resin, plastic Santas in perpetual underwater snowstorms, sculptures that appear to be moving but aren't. I feel sorry for them all. What are they thinking when they arrive at a place? Do they sigh with disappointment? And when they leave, do they have regrets? Is this sofa as happy in one corner as it is in another? And how does the room feel about it? I pity inanimate objects. I pity inanimate objects. I pity inanimate objects. I pity them all. Physics isn't fair, is fulfilled? And is the sawdust changed? I worry about these things. Peppercorns don't move until they contaminate the ice cream. 3 weeks later, is the golden thought knocks happy old. I care about these things. Some things are better left alone. Grains of sand prefer their own company. But magnets are too feast. No choice for sugar, but what choice could there be but to drown in coffee or to drown in tea? The frustrations of being inanimate. Maybe it's better that way. The fewer the moving parts, the less there is to go wrong. I wonder about these things. I'm getting inanimate objects. I'm getting inanimate objects. I'm getting inanimate objects. I'm getting
And you're listening to Espresso Sesh, best frequencies forever. Beaunoise, it's in the mix right now, picking up songs that were influential to him for his work as a composer, musician, producer, and so before you pick the other song, no? So do you have this critical? So when you listen to some music, no? In general, you are like you're driving, going to work, no? Or you just when you listen to music, do you enjoy it as it is, or you listen to it technically, like, oh, this is recorded there, the kind of reverb.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that, and like that's like a lot of people ask me that, and it's something I think I went through this sort of arc of when I first started working in studios and working on music. And I mean, one of the things actually when I was learning was like, and a couple people I worked with sort of like taught me how to listen and taught me how to pay attention to different parts of things, because I think like a lot of us listen and enjoy, but to sort of listen on an active technical level is a very specific skill you start to develop of like analyzing stuff. And once I started to do that, I started to listen to all the music I knew through that filter of like, how was this done? How was this put together? Like, I wonder how this worked. Like, you know, what's the dynamic range of this? What's the tonal balance? Like, you know, and then also thinking about how much space it takes up, like how it develops, all those sort of things. You start thinking about that a lot. And I got to a point where like I started to notice how like it was starting to kind of interrupt with how much I was just purely enjoying music. And in a way, I feel like it's like I kind of backed off from that a little bit. In a way, it's like I almost feel like it's like I can shift into that mode of analysis, but my default mode usually isn't to just analyze stuff. Like I try to like stay in this mode of just like enjoying music as a listener. So if a song comes on the radio, like I'll just try to listen to it. If someone plays something for me, I actually try not to analyze it like from a recording or like a technical standpoint. I try to really just like listen to it and try to understand why they enjoy it first. But if I really like something, of course, I'm sort of like starting to wonder. I was like, I wonder what that is. You know, it's like it very quickly becomes that. So I guess maybe it's like a pair of glasses I can put on, but I can take them off again, sort of.
So you can take them off. So,
I do, yeah.
Okay,
In fact, like I had to, like, because otherwise I just spend my entire. I mean, it's just like the love of it is sort of gone a little bit, and
yeah, because I mean, kind of like became like always like checking how a recording is made, and you know, so no joy, just just
work. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I kind of one of the things that I think somebody I worked with said is like, you know, even the greatest chef has to come home and eat at some point, you know, and so it's like just sort of remembering it's like. Sometimes you just need to like make yourself a grilled cheese sandwich. You can't think about whether it's the best grilled cheese sandwich ever made. You can just enjoy it. And I think I try to like shift out of that mode of like hyper analysis, because otherwise, yeah, it would become a little bit joyless. So,
yeah, no, I see that. That's why I ask you.
Yeah, there's also one more thing I think I wanted to add is that I used to also want to really know how all of my favorite recordings were made, and I used to read all the books and I'd watch the videos and I'd do this research. I was like, where do they record it, and like what equipment do they use? And I still do that a lot, and I'm still really curious. I love reading liner notes. The first thing I do when I get a record is I read the credits. I love credits. I love liner notes. But sometimes I listen to music and I purposely try not to understand how they made it, because I want that to remain behind the curtain. There's been a couple times where like I looked a little bit too deep. I was like, I learned exactly how some of the magic happened on a record that I've always been fascinated with. And in a way, it kind of killed it just a little bit for me. And so I try to be careful about like some things. I'm like, I don't really need, you know, it's like, you know, do I need to know exactly how Godly and Kareem made that song? It's like, I have an idea, but I'm also like, I kind of like it just existing as this completely bizarre pitch shifted song. And like, maybe I don't need to, you know, know every little detail of it. Yeah. So I've kind of maybe backed off a little bit, you know, as the years went on.
Okay, no, that was just out of curiosity. That's why I asked you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
I have sometimes that same problem.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like you get so inside of it. Yeah, totally.
I mean, also, the liner notes, the way to know, to discover how they made this record that you love, it's part of your job, no?
Yeah, it is.
Because you learn from it. No?
Exactly. It's like I start to have producers I love. I start to have studios I love. And so it is part of it is learning that and understanding that stuff. But I think it's like there has to be a balance where you can just go back to being a listener and enjoy it too.
So you spend time just enjoying listening to music?
Oh yeah, I have to. Yep, it's like I go through phases where like when I am working a lot, you know, if I'm working a lot, especially if I'm mixing all day, I usually don't listen to music when I come home at the end of the day. I try to listen to music in the morning always. And somebody told me I don't know how true this is, but that it takes about 45 to 60 minutes of undistracted, active listening before your brain is completely processing music. And so like that first like 15 minutes of the day, you're kind of not actually, you know, if you...
No, say it again. I didn't get it. This.
Someone told, and I should probably actually like research this before I keep like telling people it, but I was either told or read that it takes about 45 to 60 minutes of undistracted, not like reading or whatever, or looking at your phone, like undistracted, attentive listening before your brain has kind of settled down and is completely focused on the act of processing and understanding music. And
it's kind of a warm-up time.
It's kind of a warm-up time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, because it's, you know, or it's almost, you can think of it maybe like meditation in a way too, where it's like it takes a while for the world to drop away, for you to stop thinking about what happened. And so I try to listen to music in the morning a little bit as I get going, just to kind of start getting to the spot where I can listen to music, where I can go in and work and think about stuff all day. So that's the time that I have to listen to music that I enjoy. At the end of the day, sometimes it's tougher just because I feel like I want to preserve my hearing, and I kind of don't want to like get burned out too much.
Yeah, also probably because your ear needs some rest after, you know, working all day. And another question that comes like kind of spontaneous, no?
Yeah.
So, so Nietzsche was saying, Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, that when you have to write, stop reading for a bit. No, so
Yeah.
if you wanna like really
If
like
you actually want to write, you need to stop reading.
yeah,
Yeah.
for a bit, no,
Yeah.
before writing, like stop reading.
Mhm.
So do you when you write your own music, do you like just like isolate yourself
Like a
from
little bit of-
stimulus external? Because otherwise we have a tendency of like reprocess. I mean,
Oh yeah, like whatever you is coming in.
creativity is a reprocess, no? Like even like the dreams,
Yeah.
you know. So we always like reprocess elements that we
Whether you want to or
interiorize.
not, yeah. Ideally, like I wish I had the time to like have a buffer between when I'm working on music and when I'm working on my own music. The necessity of it is that it's just like it's in these times, like at the end of the day, or like in the morning, or just whenever I have a little bit of time. So there honestly isn't a lot of buffer between that. The one thing I will say is like when I am working on some of my own music, I do try to avoid listening to things that are too similar. It's like the influences I have are in my mind, and they're sort of always there. And maybe I'll check in with some of that stuff, but sometimes I try to stay away from it just because I don't want it to be too close or too familiar. And I work with artists that do that too. I definitely work with artists that like when they're in the middle of working on a record, they don't listen to any other music. Like that's like they've just basically closed it off while they're doing that, and then when they get done, they kind of pick it up again. So
Yeah, because like there are people that work in a different way. That's
Yep.
why I asked
yeah,
you.
yeah. No. I wish I could. Yeah, if I had the time, I probably would. But I think the necessity sort of just forces me to like find the moments whenever I can. So, and because of that, there are definitely times where like the thing I'm working on shows up in the music. I'm like, oh yeah, like, or it'll be a melody or an idea, and I'm like, oh, I think that's actually from something else. Like
Yeah.
that sort of cross pollination happens.
I mean, if it's cross-pollination, it's all right. But if you like plagiarism, it's not.
Yeah,
no? So
no, exactly.
sometimes if you listen too much to something, then like the influence is like
Yeah, it's like
taking
very.
over. No? And,
Yep, it's very clear.
became-
It's
yeah.
clear and direct. Yeah, totally.
All right, time is running. You have like a quick other selection.
Oh yeah, I would love to play one more song if
Yeah.
I could. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna play. I thought I'd play something that really has informed a lot of my own music. It's a track by Laurie Spiegel. Incredible electronic and contemporary composer. Done a lot of work with synthesizers and with early computers. The piece is called Patchwork, and I would say if there was like a manifesto for a lot of the music I make, or if you want to talk about influences, in some sad, cheap way, I've been copying this piece of music for a lot of the music I make too, and I think like it'd probably be very apparent. It's a really, really simple but really beautiful piece of music that I love.
So Laurie Spiegel, Patchwork, and you're listening to Espresso Sesh. It's 3:49. Beaunoise.